On January 18, 2008, in a quiet neighborhood in Canada, a homeless man was collecting bottles to sell. While searching through the trash, he was surprised by a terrifying sight, a severed human arm placed inside a bag. In shock, he did not know what to do, so he started knocking on the neighbors' doors warning them of the horrific sight. One of the residents responded and went to see for himself, and when he saw the arm, he trembled and decided to call the police immediately. When the police arrived at the scene, they discovered that the arm was indeed human. The police began investigating the area and continued searching the nearby containers. And here was the second surprise. They found the left arm of the same body, and some of the fingers were severed. The arms were transferred to the forensic department for examination, and the investigators' biggest fear was that they were facing a serial murder. But after analysis, they confirmed that the arms belonged to the same victim. Fortunately, they were able to identify the victim through fingerprints, and the young man's name was Chad Larkey, 22 years old. The investigators went to Chad's mother's house to inform her of the shocking news. The mother was in a state of shock and horror, as she confirmed that her son was a peaceful young man who had no enemies. The investigators began investigating neighbors and friends, and everyone confirmed that Chad was a respectful and well-mannered person. On the night of the crime, Chad was in a bar in the area, drinking heavily. By reviewing the camera recordings in the bar and the recent calls on his phone, it was found that Chad called his father to take him home. The strange thing is that after Chad was killed, the police summoned his father to investigate, but he showed an unexpected reaction and showed no interest in his son's murder. The problem is that during the investigation, his father began to tell them the details of what happened on the day of the crime. He told them after he picked up his son from the bar. "We were on our way home. But on the way, Chad told me that his best friend named Dane was always waiting for him downstairs. When we got home, they met up with him and I went to buy some groceries from the supermarket. After I got back, I postponed the phone call and went home." Now, the story that Chad's father told did not convince the investigators. The problem is that after the investigators checked the surveillance, it turned out that what he was saying was true. Because when he and his friend met his father, Chad went to the supermarket and then came back home. During the investigation, the investigators discovered that his father seemed sincere, and because after they looked into his friend Dane's criminal record, they discovered that he had a history of drug and alcohol abuse. But is it possible that his best friend, who is only 23 years old, would commit such a crime? After dissecting the arms, it was clear to them that the criminal had no experience in such matters. Because he randomly cut and removed muscles and tendons, it was clear that this person had no prior criminal record. The investigation continued, and suspicions began to revolve around Chad's close friend, Dean, who was the last person to see him before his murder. Dean had a criminal record that included his involvement in drugs. When the investigators followed up on the evidence, they discovered that Dean had rented a truck before the arson attack near the farm. Investigators found sharp tools, footprints, and car tires at the fire site, but would this lead them to any evidence? So far, no. But one of the investigators accidentally saw a receipt near the fire. He opened it and started looking at it. They discovered that this receipt was from a store called Art 7 and was dated 2 weeks ago. They went to the store and watched the camera recordings. They were able to see the suspect buying the minutes he had. That's when they bumped into the person. This person was Chad's loyal friend and the last person he was with. But don't rush, we don't have any conclusive evidence yet. After they did a search of a debt record, it showed them that he had rented a truck before the fire started. The tires that were on the truck were the same as the tires that were at the fire site. The strangest thing of all is that they found the same truck near the farm. But it was burned. The fire was intentional. Fortunately for them, the front part of the car was intact. While searching inside, they found a shoe of the same size as the one whose marks were on the snow. There was also a receipt for buying a can of fuel. When they followed the place and time that were on the receipt, they were shocked to find out that Dean was the one who bought it, went to a gas station, and filled it with gas. This way, all the evidence would confirm that he was the one behind the fire. But there was no proof that he was the one who killed and dismembered his friend. The investigators immediately asked for a search warrant for Dean's house. And until their request was not granted, they circulated a search warrant for Dean's private car. After a while, they found it burned in a remote area. It was taken out and the car was completely bare. Why? What was the reason? And is it possible that Dean had not been found by the police until now? After searching, it turned out that he was hiding with one of his friends. When he knew that the police were looking for him, he made a malicious move. Dean had a serious wound, and if the police saw him, everything would be clear to them. Exactly as you might have thought, Dean was the killer. The wound was caused by his hand being cut up while his friend was being cut up. To hide the evidence, he went to the kitchen and burned his hand with a frying pan to distract them. The burn was third degree. Unfortunately for him, the police obtained a warrant to search his house. When they arrived, they entered the house. They were surprised by the sight. The carpets in the house were torn up. The house was in ruins and cleaning materials were everywhere. The investigators started looking for traces of blood or anything that would confirm that the crime happened in the house. Indeed, traces of blood on the walls were enough. When they examined the blood, they were shocked and they confirmed that it matched the blood of the victim, Chad. There was a lot of other evidence. This way, they were sure that Dean was the killer. They confronted him. They brought him and started interrogating him. But he insisted that he did not confess to anything. He remained calm throughout the investigation. The investigators called Chad's mother because her condition was indescribable. She started talking to him and begging him to tell her where her son's body was, so that she could bury him.
Because I'm gonna die if I don't know what happened. Please. Get my boy.
And then the investigators pressured him to tell the reason that made him kill his friend, but he insisted that he wouldn't confess to anything. When the trial started, he insisted that he wouldn't confess to anything. And if they wanted to wait for him to talk, it would have been a long time. The shock was that the court sentenced him to only 10 years in prison. After a year in prison, Dean confessed that he was the one who committed the murder of his friend Chad. But he insisted that he wouldn't tell the reason. And if you want to ask what happened in the session of the deceased's testimony, I will tell you that no one has made it difficult for him to this day. And Dean insisted that he wouldn't tell them what he did in the session. But in my opinion, we cut it up and distributed it in the city's dumpsters. And no one noticed any evidence of it. And he might have gotten rid of it in a faraway place, like he did in the truck and his car. Why would he do this? And why would he kill his best friend? I told you at the beginning of the story that Dean had a history of drugs and narcotics. It is likely that on the day of the crime he was addicted and did what he did. What he does is do everything and turns him from a human into a predatory animal. May God protect you. As for his father's strange reaction, no one knew the reason at all. Although there was no evidence of the crime, here we have reached the end of the story. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to like and subscribe.